Fury by Henry Kuttner. So this is the 52nd book I've read in this series I'm doing called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction. And this book was copyright 1947, and it's considered one of the classics of the golden age of science fiction. And while it gives credit to Henry Kuttner as the author on here, if you read the introduction by C.L. Moore in this version I have, she talks about how almost all of their works were a collaborative effort between this husband and wife duo. So this is the first novel I've read from Kuttner. I don't think he wrote many novels. He wrote a lot of short stories, but I gotta say, this deserves to be considered a classic of Golden Age science fiction. It has some pros and cons to it, of course, but I really enjoyed almost the entire reading experience of this one. And the ending of this one was really good, and it all came together in a unique way that I really didn't see coming. So let's just kind of go back and talk about what this book is about. So in this book, we are in a future about 700 years or so after Earth has kind of been rendered uninhabitable. We don't know all the details, but some sort of nuclear event rendered most of the planet, is filled with radiation, and humanity had kind of mastered space travel at this time. And so they ended up sending some people to colonize Venus. And this is one thing you kind of have to suspend some of your disbelief when reading a book like this, because a lot wasn't really known about Venus at the time. And you might get some eye rolling if you read this in a modern context. But if you can ignore that, what Henry Kuttner envisions is a planet that has plenty of life on it. There's animals, there's plant life, there's oceans. Humans can walk around on the planet, but it's not completely advisable, so especially for long periods of time at the time when they get here. So most of mankind have moved into these underground domed cities that are at the bottom of the ocean. And due to some factors, some of the population, when they left Earth, had been exposed to some radiation. This is another thing you have to kind of take with a grain of salt. But this radiation has kind of allowed certain branches of humanity to be somewhat immortal, living up to maybe like 1,000 years. That's what the thought process is, because since we're only 700 years in the future, they're not really sure how long they're going to live. But that's kind of the idea we're given in the beginning. So this has kind of set up this ruling class. This small group that are these immortals have kind of been able to focus on kind of guiding humanity and researching things and spending a lot of time doing things that have put them above the rest of the population, who still are going to live to maybe like 80 years. So that's kind of the setup and this world building we get of this story. Now, when the story starts, one of these immortal families, they're called the Harkers, and they're one of the most prestigious of these immortals, and they have their hand in a lot of this societal shaping and all of this kind of stuff. And there's like generations of them. So you have the father, the grandfather, and many, many more after that. So you've got about 5 different generations all hanging out, talking together. And a child was just born into this family, and in the childbirthing process, the mother died, and she was immortal. So this took away her immortality. And the husband of this woman who died blames the child, and the child is named Sam. And he wants to kill the child, but his father and grandfather and great-grandfather try to kind of talk him out of this. And so what ends up happening is they modify him to look like one of these kind of ordinary citizens, which they're a little bit shorter and they just look a little bit different. The immortals have kind of this tall, slender appearance. And so as a child, they alter his appearance and they throw him into a family that doesn't really know. And so Sam grows up not really realizing he is immortal for his childhood. And he may or may not ever find this out. I don't want to spoil anything in this book. But he's just in a unique situation, and you find out that there's some people pulling some strings for him throughout his life, whether it's for good or for bad. And this story really is about him and his journey and what he ultimately means for this civilization. So the idea is there's some people that think that humanity is growing stagnant by living in these underground cities, and that it could lead to basically a death of humanity through this kind of stagnation. So there are a group of people who want to move up to the surface of the planet, establish some colonies up there, get back into space travel, and possibly go to other worlds or other galaxies or whatever the case may be. But they see this as a stagnation that could lead to the complete destruction of humanity. So the story is Sam and his journey through this process. And I got to say, if there's some stretches through this book that could maybe drag on, or you're not sure where the author or authors are going with this one, but if you hang on through the end to this one, it's definitely worth it. So that's kind of where I want to leave the book. There is another interesting thing. If you read the introduction by C.L. Moore, she brings up some interesting ideas or insight, I guess you would say, into the story. And she said some of the basic themes that are in this book, Henry Kuttner, his theme that kind of follows through in this book is authority is dangerous and I will never submit to it. And then C.L. Moore, what she was able to introduce into the story was a theme that she, I guess, likes to explore through a lot of her literature, is the most treacherous thing in life is love. So it is a very good mixture of a lot of different themes, and I think this book comes together really well. Like I said, one of the biggest things to get over is just some of the science that we have kind of dispelled or disproved over the years since this book was written. And, this book had a really serious tone. And when you're reading about some of these planets that were envisioned, you kind of, I harken back to like Edgar Rice Burroughs and some of that pulpier writing that I maybe wouldn't take quite as serious and maybe read it for the adventure in it. But you kind of have a mixture here. You have the pulpier ideas of some of these planets or whatnot, but it's really mixed with some serious, deep thinking themes, and the way it comes together is really good. So it's probably not one of my favorite of the golden age of science fiction, but you can see the influence on this one for sure. The main character is not really a likable character through much of this book, but once you see that he's kind of been put into this situation and he's having some strings pulled around him, you do start sympathizing with him a little bit. It reminded me of some of Bester's characters, although this was written before Bester was writing some of his two most famous novels. So anyways, if you're really looking for a good classic of the golden age that gets into a little bit of the deeper themes that will, that come out a little bit more in the 50s and 60s, I think this is a really great example of it, and you should definitely check it out if you get some time. So next up, I threw out my monthly wrap-up video, and I had a lot of people talking about On Wings of Song by Thomas M. Dish. So the people have spoken, and I'm moving this right up to the next book that I'm going to read. So just look for that review coming out next, and once again, thanks for watching.